Meeting to order. I don't remember how we actually do roll call. What do we do? Just say your name? How about that?
Jan Horvath.
Okay.
Ron Bates.
Kathy Kem, present. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from September 20th. Any additions, corrections, deletions, anything?
Move to approve.
Awesome.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. We have no old business. One new item of business. This is case number 2021-27BZA. And I guess we'll do the staff report.
Okay, yep, thank you. So this is, again, for a request for 806 North Broadway. This is a request to allow an accessory dwelling unit in which neither the principal dwelling nor the accessory dwelling will be occupied by the owner. Accessory dwelling units are something that we recently added to our development regulations in 2019. They were previously not addressed in the development regulations, and we had a number of requests to allow those. What an accessory dwelling unit is basically a secondary dwelling unit on a single family property. So in a case like this where there's a detached garage or a carriage house, we have a lot of those in town. And we had a lot of folks wanting to do some sort of dwelling unit in those, either for a family member or to rent. And so in our update to the development regulations in 2019, we did a fair amount of research into other cities that have addressed those in their regulations and came up with our own set of standards for those. So since that time, this is actually the first request that we've had for one. We had a number of requests come in that we had to just tell people we don't have it addressed, you're not able to do that. We got that added into the regulations and then just haven't had any requests until this time. So this is our first one that we're seeing. And the applicant is currently living in this house. He's a student at CGSC and has purchased the property with the intent to renovate the detached garage into an accessory dwelling unit. And he will be living in the primary dwelling until he's finished at CGSC next summer, and then intends to, after he moves, would be renting both units separately, so the house and then the accessory dwelling unit in the garage, so then would not meet that requirement that we had put in place for the owner to live in either the principal dwelling or the accessory dwelling. So that's kind of where we're at with that. So again, the property is at 806 North Broadway. There's an existing single-family home and a detached garage. Again, the owner is renovating the garage to have a dwelling unit in it on the upper level of that. And as I said, accessory dwelling units are allowed with, they do require issuance of a special use permit. So pending any approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals, this would still require a special use permit to allow that accessory dwelling unit. So I did include in here all 7 criteria that we have established in the development regulations for accessory dwelling units. This particular request does meet all of those requirements except for the owner has indicated again that he would not be living on the property after June of next year. So if you have any questions, I can answer those for you. And then again, we do have the applicant here as well.
Please, go ahead.
What's the city's position for somebody who intends to live in their residence and gets a special use permit and then creates this dwelling and then for whatever reason later has to move? Would the special use permit then be withdrawn from them or taken from them, or what's the procedure there?
Yeah, so the special use permit would carry with the property, but it would be subject to all of these regulations, requirements. So if an owner got a special use permit, say in this case, got a special use permit to allow an accessory dwelling unit on their property, met all of the requirements, and then they sold their property, the new owners would be required to meet all of those same requirements, or the special use permit would not be valid. So as with any special use permit, once those requirements are not met, the special use permit is no longer valid.
So do you have a tracking procedure for that, or?
Yep, so special use permits require a renewal every year through our city clerk's office, and so we check that the requirements are still being met.
Okay, thanks.
So, obviously, we're being a little proactive in this case, since he's here until June of 2022 or thereabouts. Is it too early to do this? I mean, what if he gets picked up for Sam's and he gets to stay for another year? You're not,
Well, and,
don't intend to, huh?
yeah, you can,
Sorry?
The results came out today, so I'm not going to Sam's.
Oh, did they really? Oh, okay. I haven't seen my husband yet, so.
yeah, so, and that's, you know, actually good planning on the applicant's part, you know, to get everything in place before getting too far into a project. That's something that we run into from time to time. An owner will get quite a ways down the road of spending a fair amount of money and making improvements to find out after the fact that, you know, something's not allowed. So this sort of situation, we actually prefer. It benefits, you know, the applicant and owner and the city as well, so we don't run into that type of situation.
Is it possible that the variance is granted and the city says you don't meet you don't meet our rules here, so we're not gonna issue a special use permit?
That would always be a possibility. Like I said, all the other requirements that we've put in place for an accessory dwelling unit are met with this property. Aside from the requirement that the owner live in one of the units. So in this case, if the BZA were to grant approval of this, then we would go to the Planning Commission for the special use permit, and staff would support that application. With the Board of Zoning Appeals, staff doesn't offer a recommendation since it's those certain criteria that must be met, so staff doesn't offer a recommendation. When we take something to Planning Commission, we review it based on the criteria and the development regulations and offer a recommendation, and so staff would support that. And I don't see any reason that the Planning Commission and City Commission would not approve that request. You know, the requirements for allowing accessory dwelling units were reviewed by both the Planning Commission and City Commission when we put those in. And so these requirements are requirements that both of those boards have already seen and agreed to at this point.
So, obviously, the issue is he would not be living on the premises.
Correct.
So what is the intent of the ordinance, which I think is important for us to look at? It says that the city wants the owner to live in at least one of the dwelling units.
Yeah, so this is, in our research of other cities that have regulations for ADUs, this is very common. Every city I looked at actually has this requirement. And so the intent really is to keep it from becoming a multifamily situation. So the intent of an accessory dwelling unit is, again, to have the owner living in one of those two units, and typically then the accessory is either, you know, for rent to generate additional income for the property, or a lot of times it'll be for a relative, for, you know, parents, retired parents, or an adult child or something of that nature. But really the intent is to keep a single family property from becoming a multifamily property, where both are being rented.
Is there any
the intent.
multifamily zoning around it, surrounding it?
Let's see. Well, the North Broadway School is right across the street. That's a multifamily property. Let me get the zoning turned on here.
So if he were to rezone from multifamily,
So the green hatched are multifamily. So there's the Broadway School right across the street, and then just below that is that the large house. I know you
Yeah.
guys know what it looks like, and I can't think of what it's called off the top of my head. So rezoning is not something that staff would really recommend. That would really amount to spot zoning. It's a single family property, a single family neighborhood, and so for you know, a specific request like this, really a variance process is going to be the best way to go.
Does somebody moving from a property that didn't have to go through this procedure because it's already in existence? I own a house, I don't own a house, but let's say. I owned a house that has one of these on it, that's been there for years, and then I sell the property to some new person. Are they then subject to this because they're a new owner?
So if there was an existing accessory unit on the property,
Yes.
and I know we have them in town, No, so change in ownership does not trigger a non-conforming use to come into conformance. We have a number of them in town. These requirements are for someone creating a new accessory dwelling unit.
Okay.
So, but prior to this, was a special use permit even required for an accessory dwelling unit, or could you even do
They
an
just weren't
accessory?
allowed.
So we don't really have any others that could.
Yeah, we didn't have any regulations for them, and that's how this came up. We know they exist in town. There are a lot of older homes that have those sort of carriage houses or something, some other detached structure that either was designed as a separate living quarters or had been converted into that over the years, and had just been done without any regulation. And so our regulations just did not even address that. And so since they were not addressed, we couldn't allow people to do it. We had to come up with a way to facilitate that when we had the request come in.
Okay. So I certainly don't mind an accessory dwelling unit there, but I have problems with it going against the spirit and intent of the ordinance, which seems fairly straightforward, and I don't see any way that, there are extenuating circumstances to get around that intent. Personally. I guess I didn't open the public hearing, did I?
Yep, so you can open the public hearing and then we can have the applicant
You
speak
guys-
a little bit about his plans.
Have any other questions for staff?
I don't.
I'll open the public hearing. Would you like to speak in favor of it? I assume you would.
Sure, thank you. So my name's Phil, and I just bought the property when I got here a couple months ago. And I'll be leaving in June for sure. I won't be staying here. And two property owners before me put up all the framing in this apartment, this unfinished apartment above the garage. I only know that because the neighbors behind me told me that when I met them. And then they stopped for some reason. So it's got all the framing and everything in there for the walls, so it's set up for 4 rooms. So the intent is for 1 bed, 1 bath, living room, and a kitchen. So 2 parking spots, which I indicated on my graphics if you're able to take a look, in the backyard of the property, which there's already room for it, so there you can see it. So you're looking at the top floor of it, which would be the entrance to the apartment that I would like to finish and rent out separately. And then on the other side, since it's built into the hill there, is the 2 garage doors right there that enter into the garage itself. So
That's off the alley. The garage doors are off the alley.
yes, and that garage portion there with those doors would belong to the 4 bed, 2 bath house, which I've designated as Unit A just for discussion purposes. And so that would belong to Unit A, which is the 4 bed, 2 bath house, and then Unit B, which is the one that I'm trying to build, would have 2 parking spaces accessed via that gate that you can see, that wooden gate in there. It's already got all the utilities in it with the exception of water and gas, so somebody was definitely planning on doing something there. As far as I can tell from living there for as long as I've lived there, and I use the gym every day, the garage, because my gym's in there. I don't think there's going to be any adverse effect to the traffic there or anything. I met one of my neighbors who said that they didn't have any problems with it. If there's not an apartment there, I really don't know what else I'm going to do with it. It's kind of like a waste of space when I do rent it. It's like just storage. It's just plywood on the floor and everything. I don't know if you have any other questions specific to it, but I really think I acknowledge what you said about the spirit of the zoning or of the laws there. But beyond that, I really think it's going to have minimal to no effect to all my neighbors right there. And having spoken with them a couple of times, nobody's brought it up. The one neighbor that I did talk to on the top right photo there, you can see he's got the wood and the chain link fence. That's a family that lives there. They got the letter in the mail from y'all saying that I was going to do it, and they didn't have a problem with it.
And we didn't have any feedback from neighbors for or against this after we sent out the notifications.
I have another question for you. What's the possibility of doing a lot split?
Let's go back to. That would not be able to happen.
Too small?
Yeah, and we don't consider alley access a street frontage, so. And I will say, since, again, this is the first one that's come through, and so this is sort of the first test of these regulations, this can kind of be a, decision, is this a way that we want to go with necessarily requiring ownership, the owner to live on one of the properties? Or is that something that, if it's gonna be reviewed through a special use permit anyway, is that maybe something that isn't necessary? So, it's kind of our first stab at allowing accessory dwelling units, so it's, kind of figuring out what's gonna be appropriate for Leavenworth.
And then I do see the dilemma of if you're not occupying either unit, why is that not multifamily? And it's in a single-family district.
Yes.
It's a conundrum.
And sir, I know that you had the question about the square footage. Were you able to find that information? I pulled it for you if you still need it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion from the board?
I second.
I have made a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Any further discussion?
Not for me, ma'am.
Okay.
Does the city have a position on like mother-in-law apartments where people kind of, I suspect people do that without getting permission, where they just kind of create a little kitchenette in the basement and that type of thing? But
Yeah.
if somebody does bother to come in and ask about it.
So if it's in the primary dwelling, so you have a basement, that you're gonna add a kitchenette or something, by building codes, that's not considered a separate dwelling unit. So that wouldn't fall under this.
But it's multifamily then.
It technically could be, but based on building codes, it doesn't meet that requirement. There would be specific, fire separation walls and separate entrances, and there are certain, kitchen and bathroom requirements for separate dwelling units. But someone can add a kitchen or something inside their house, and if they're not meeting those separation requirements that, meet the building codes for multifamily, it's still considered a single-family dwelling. So if you want to rent that out as a separate space, or if someone wanted to, then that would be a different discussion. But typically, if someone's just adding like a mother-in-law suite in their basement, they're not trying to meet those requirements anyway. They're just trying to set something up for mom, comfortable in the basement.
And they wouldn't be collecting rent?
Correct.
Yeah.
Or they might, but we wouldn't be
well,
involved in that, so.
They might be needing pay, Mom.
Yeah.
Any other discussion?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to read the criteria that we have to meet for a variance. A request for a variance may be granted upon the finding of the board that all of the following conditions have been met. The board shall make a determination on each condition, and the findings shall be entered into the record. So there are 5 of these, which I'm sure you're familiar with. First, that the variance requested arises from such a condition which is unique to the property in question and is not ordinarily found in the same zone or district and is not created by an action or actions of the property owner or the applicant. So we'll
I agree with that.
agree?
I agree.
Agree. B, that the granting of the permit for the variance will not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners or residents. And I'll start with me. I'll agree.
I agree. Agree.
C, that the strict application of provisions of the development regulations from which the variance is requested will constitute unnecessary hardship upon the property owner represented in the application.
Agree. Agree.
Disagree. D, that the variance desired will not adversely affect the public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, or general welfare. I'd agree with that.
Agree. Agree.
And then lastly, the granting of the variance desired will not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of the development regulations, and I have to disagree with that one.
I agree.
I disagree.
Okay. So we were not able to find for all 5 elements, and so the application for the variance is denied. I'm so sorry.
Appreciate your time.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, we do not have any other business tonight, and we do not have any for next month.
Oh, nice. All righty,
So-
a month out. All
All
right.
right.
In that case, motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.